Because when I was 18, I won the teenage nationals, and I planned my entire career out. At that point, I said, all right, I'm gonna go to school, then I'm gonna win the nationals, turn pro. I'm going to some pro shows. I'm gonna go to Arnold, win the Arnold. I'm gonna go to Olympia, win the Olympia. And I planned all this stuff out when I was 18.
First of all, I want to thank you for joining me. This is my first podcast. It's been a long time coming. Everyone who's around me often knows that I'm in their ear about what I'm excited to discuss in a podcast. And I got to the point where clients were like, okay, well, whenever it starts, just let me know. And I'm like, oh, now I'm really just talking, not my ass. So I'm really excited that you're able to join me on this first one.
My brother, thank you for having me on the first one, and I'm glad I could be the first one. So, popping your cherry today, not a virgin no more.
Not a virgin no more. And we started speaking about it at the Olympia. I was so happy that I was actually in your seat.
We were actually at the Olympia, yeah, and I walked up and I said, hey man, you're in my seat. And you looked and I said, oh hey, what's up, Ray? And you popped the question to me. I was like, absolutely, I'll do it. When we get back to Dallas, we'll make it happen.
Awesome, man. Well, first off, I just wanted to read something to you. I took a little bit of time last night to try to lay my thoughts out. This podcast for me means a lot because it has to do with, let me just read this for you. I feel as humans, we instinctively want to help everyone if possible. But if we're having a tough time taking care of ourselves, others quickly fall by the wayside. I feel as a society, the biggest threat to our freedom is an inability to regulate ourselves in a manner that sustains health and allows us to fulfill our individual goals. We all are going to have our addictions. It is nature. But these addictions but are these addictions getting in the way of our goals as individuals? And even more importantly, are they negatively impacting us as a species? For example, some of us cannot go without processed food. Some of us, it's scrolling through our social media. Others, it's drugs and alcohol. Vices that are numbing and create passivity. These tools of regulation may be helpful in moments to resolve whatever anxieties or stresses, but are coming across, to resolve whatever anxieties or stresses we are coming across. But in the long run, as individuals and as a collective, they are debilitating. They leave us in a state of ignorance to the world around us, and this puts our society at risk. If we can not manage ourselves without a sedative, how are we supposed to voice concern about the beneficial impact of the food we are consuming, or the schools our children are attending? How are we supposed to conduct exploratory dialogue with other members of our society for the greater good? This is a problem that stands out to me because it is something that I've grappled with my entire life. My default pattern was one that required substances. And for a long time, I paid little to no attention to the negative effect it had on me as a member of society. But once I had my firstborn, I knew that this was not a pattern I wanted to continue to pass down to the generations after me. I heard Jordan Peterson mention in his latest podcast with Joe Rogan, to the degree that you are not anxious, something is uniting all the directions you can take. And I felt that was a great way to start things off. Just hearing that, where does that go for you?
To sum all that up, the word I think of is discipline. I think and the best definition I've ever heard of discipline was from Mike Tyson. He said, discipline is doing what you hate to do, but doing it like you love doing it. And I heard him say that, and that stuck with me. And he's right. All these things, whether it's an addiction, the way you don't get addicted is have discipline. And the way you beat an addiction is you gotta have an inner strength and you have discipline. I think your whole life, I think whether you're trying to be in shape or you're trying to do better at work or you're trying to build a business, you have to have discipline. And without discipline, you have nothing. And just a lot of times discipline is doing what you hate doing, but doing it like you like it. And that's what it is, and I think that's the best definition I've ever heard, and I think that's what comes to mind. Listen to everything you just spoke about. I think that's without discipline, you can't beat any of those things. You can't get anywhere in life.
During your career, what are the things that you did not like doing that you still did?
Well, I hated doing cardio. Um, Cardio was one of those things that I hated it, and I don't know too many bodybuilders that actually like doing cardio. I mean, it's kind of mindless, especially on a day like today where it's weather's bad outside, it's pouring down rain, and you got however much cardio you got to do, and you sit there on the step mill or treadmill or whatever it is, or bike, and you just sit there and go go go. It's like mindless, and I used to hate it, but I'd get on there and I would go as hard as I could go. If I tried to get my heart rate up to 70% of max or whatever it was, I'd do it, and you learn to embrace it. And even though I hated doing it, I learned to embrace it because I'm like, all right, I have to do this. If I don't, then I'm gonna get beat by somebody who does do it. And so I learned to embrace it, and that's just part of it, part of the process. Even like deadlifts, I hated deadlifting. My workout partner was one of the best deadlifters of all time, and yeah, and so I did them every week with the dude. And because of that, I got better and better. My back improved. That was a weakness I needed to bring up, and because we deadlifted and we deadlifted so hard, my back got better and better. And I learned to embrace it, and it's like once again, it's discipline. It's doing what you hate doing, but doing like you love doing it.
What are some things that you loved about the sport?
It's an individual sport. When I played football, I played other sports. I used to get very frustrated because you could have, like in football, you got 11 guys on the field. 10 guys can do their job. One guy's looking at a bug in the grass or something, and you lose the game. And that used to make me so mad because I was so competitive. And, I'm out there giving it all. Some of the other guys are giving it everything they got. And somebody ain't doing their job 100%, makes a mistake, didn't listen to the play, just whatever, and you lose the game. I used to get so frustrated about that. So when bodybuilding came along, I'm like, this is all on me. And I will say this: bodybuilding is not an individual sport; it's actually a team sport. I'll go more into that later. But what I liked about it was it's all about my training, how disciplined I am with my nutrition, my cardio, my posing, my tanning, all these things I'm in control of, and that's what turned me on to it because I'm like, all right, I can sink or swim based on what I do, and that's what turned me on to it.
Discussing vices, were there any vices you had growing up that you were not proud of?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. Growing up, man, I grew up in the country, grew up on a ranch, and we were really poor, and I don't really know growing up if I really had any vices growing up. I think bodybuilding was. I did my first job at 16, and bodybuilding really kept me from getting into a lot of trouble. And the guys that kind of took me in and showed me how to bodybuild or something, they were strong. They were rough guys. They were very strong, and definitely what you would call alpha males. And I think, speaking for myself and all the guys I grew up with, when you're a young teenager, I looked up to guys that were strong, dominant men because they got respect. And I think all young men want respect. I think men in general want respect. Where it's been my opinion, women want love. If you look at a relationship, a man, if you ask him, do you want love or respect? Most men are going to say respect, where women would say love. And so as a young man, I was attracted to, these guys that were strong, dominant, they got respect everywhere they went. And I was like, that's what I want to be. And so I was gravitated towards that. And so that's why I got into the bodybuilding. And, they kind of brought me in and they kept me out of a lot of trouble because, with bodybuilding, you can't go out, you ain't drinking, you ain't doing drugs, you're not doing all these bad things. I'm in bed at an early hour because I got to get sleep, I got to get up, I got to train, I got to get my meals in, I got to prepare my food ahead of time. So at a very young age, I was very disciplined and I focused on a goal where a lot of my friends weren't. A lot of guys my age, were not anything like that. So I was very different, but it paid off in the end.
Absolutely. Something that embodies why I wanted to have you on here so intently was at the end of your Josh Bryant podcast, or throughout the Josh Bryant podcast, you said, most bodybuilders train because they're bodybuilders. I became a bodybuilder because I trained. And I saw training as what you used to regulate. And it was an action that you performed to regulate. And it showed that the training was something that brought you peace of mind, it brought you balance, it put you together. It didn't create any need for external substance or
My vice probably was training. Probably still is.
Yeah.
I used training. I could take any negative in my life, and I was really good at turning it into a positive. Whether it was something that happened, in a relationship, or it was something that happened with business or an injury, I was really good at taking that negative and making it into a positive. And I would use that to fuel me when I trained. And like I said before, when I train, if I'm having a terrible day and I go train, my day gets better. If I'm having a great day and I go train, my day gets even better. And that's been my thing. That's why I love to train. And some guys, you see some of these bodybuilders, they train because they're bodybuilders. They don't do it because they love doing it. That's why you see some of these guys when they retire, and they don't look at them a year or two after they retire, they don't even look like they ever lifted weights. Then you see other guys that, I'm gonna use Rich Gaspari as an example. He competed in the 80s, early 90s. A legend of the sport. He's maybe close to 60 now, and the dude still is great, and he still trains like an animal. And there's a lot other examples like that. But I think the guys that really love to train, bodybuilding just kind of happens because you love to train. And when you're not competing anymore, you're still going to train because that's your love. And with me, that probably is my vice and addiction. God willing, I'll train until I take my last breath.
Absolutely.
So, and as far as the training thing goes, I've gotten a lot of criticism because of the way I train. But I've never once told anybody they should train the way I do. I tell people, if you can take something from what I do and incorporate it into your system, that's a win. What I do, it works for me. And I don't think you've ever heard me really criticize any of the other pros or anybody else how they train. If it works for them, it's cool. I mean, I had some of my contemporaries, they didn't train like hard at all, relatively speaking. I never criticized them because it worked for them. They're physically great and they did great. Other guys, they got to train hard, to do that. So, and if you look at most top pros and guys that have accomplished things, they don't criticize their contemporaries because you realize this works for me and that works for him, and it's cool. It's usually guys that haven't done anything that want to reach out and criticize people that do something differently.
Absolutely. Something that I feel falls in line with everyone you discussed is an intuitive method of training. So when you come into the gym, you're moving weight based on how you feel like moving weight.
Absolutely. I never, I never wrote down my workouts or anything like that. When I have a base, driving to the gym, I'd put together kind of a framework outline of what I was going to do, and but then it went by how I felt. I mean, some days you go in the gym, and I think everybody who trains can understand this. You just feel it's just on, and you just freaking blow past all your limits. You set personal records sometimes on those days.
Absolutely.
Other times you go in the gym, you feel like shit. I mean, and people said, you felt like that? I'm like, absolutely. You just the height of my career. There was days I went to the gym, I'm like, shit, I don't want to do this. And but because you got discipline, you do it, and you do it like you love it because you actually do love that, and you make it happen. And even some of those days, I set personal records on days like that because I think those days I was so focused because I didn't want to train. I didn't want to have a bad workout. And so I was even more focused than normal because I wanted to make sure I didn't waste my workout. I never want to have a bad workout. So as you just you make it happen.
And you come out of that session feeling better than you went into it.
100%. 100%. Those days, like I said, some of my best workouts ever were days I didn't want to go to the gym. I mean, and especially when you're traveling, overseas, you're jet lagged. I remember going to the gym sometimes at 12, 1, 2 in the morning overseas, because I had to work all day. I was at an expo, I had an appearance, travel, your flights get delayed, this kind of thing. But I never missed a workout. I was very disciplined in that I'm like, I ain't missing a workout. Whatever I got to do, I'm going to do it. I'm going to get a cab, I'm going to find a place that's open, and I'm going to go train. And that was just I think for me it was a principle. But I just would never let myself miss a workout, you know what I mean? So whatever I had to do, I'd make it happen.
Yeah, it's life-sustaining.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And that's what I feel like in this realm right now, in the sport of bodybuilding, we're almost getting away from that a little bit. We've become a little bit too scientific on individual muscles rather than the bodybuilder as a whole.
I agree with that. I was talking about that last night, and they asked me about the current generation, and I don't want to talk. I'm not going to speak bad about it. It's a different era, different mentality than my generation, and the previous generation was different than my generation. But I do believe it has become too scientific. The key to working out is intensity. I don't care what program you have. The most scientific program you have, if you don't bring intensity to the workout, you're going to get nothing done. And that's the key. And I've seen it over 30 years The people who train with intensity, everybody thinks they train hard. In reality, maybe 1 out of 10 actually train hard. And when I train hard, I mean training to failure. I mean, you train the muscle till you can't do another rep, and rest and do it again and again and again and repeat that day after day, week after week, year after year. And that's intensity, and that's how you make progress. And if you look at all the top champions, they all train with intensity. And everybody has different styles, different attitudes, rep schemes, all this stuff. But the one common thing, if you're going to be successful, you have to have intensity. And if you don't have that, I don't care what program you have, it's not going to work.
Yeah, in my eyes, there is science behind that. There's how well intensity, getting into the movement and immediately starting that movement from the very beginning, not wasting time during the setup or putting your body in a particular position, and how that creates balance between the entire system. So now you're not compromising parts of the body due to setup. You have now created balance through the entire system. And yes, maybe the whole system is now doing work, but that's required for the system to operate properly.
I'll break it down on a very simple level for people. When you work out and you're bodybuilding, the key is to work the muscle, get as much blood into the muscle as possible, work that muscle to failure. And when you do that, you create little microscopic tears in the muscle, proper nutrition and rest. The muscle heals, it grows back a little bigger, a little stronger, and you repeat that for years and years and years, and you look the way you look. It's very I'm oversimplifying it. There's obviously many more parts to it, but that's basically what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Is you work whatever muscle you're working, you try to work it to failure. So you can't do another rep. You damage it because that's what working out does. And then with proper rest, nutrition, it repairs itself. You come back a little bigger, a little stronger every time, and those gains slowly but surely add up over years. Ronnie Coleman, he summed it up best. Years ago, I was at an event. He was speaking, and somebody asked him about his how to describe his training. And of course, Ronnie's gotten all kinds of criticism for the way he trained or his form or whatever. Well, he said, he goes, I lift the maximum amount of weight I can lift, and I do the maximum number of reps I can do it. I rest and do it again. And if you ever trained with Ronnie, which I did as a kid, and and then every now and then as we were, both pro, but not on a regular basis by any means, but he never let anybody beat him. And the intensity he brought to the gym, was second to none. The biggest compliment I got in my life was he did an interview and they asked him about me, and he said, Branch the hardest. Nobody trained harder than Branch. They go, he trained harder than you, and he said, yeah, which was like the hugest compliment I've ever received. And,
I can only imagine.
But that sums it up. And so I think I'm using that as an example because Ronnie didn't train scientific. Ronnie was a hard worker, and he trained with intensity, and his nutrition was on point, and he outworked everybody in the gym, and he became the greatest physique of all time. So we've never seen anybody before or since that could have beat Ronnie at his prime. So that's what it takes. It takes intensity.
Absolutely. I believe there is science that can be laid on top of what has been proven to work, and what you have done and what Ronnie did and what so many others did when it came to intuitive lifting combined with intensity. I feel there's a long list of science that can back all of that. And I'm excited to, as this journey goes on, discuss that more deeply with people. Something else I wanted to discuss, stepping out from training for a second. When you weren't training, during your prime, leading up to your prime, what were you doing?
When I wasn't training during?
Like you're during your prime or leading up to your prime, when you weren't in the gym or when you weren't prepping your meals, what were you spending your day doing?
So I always worked. So, I opened my gym when I was in my 20s. I had a personal training gym. And so I opened my own gym. I had that for 8 years. And had that in South Lake. And that gave me a platform to chase my dream. Everybody has dreams, right? Mm-hmm. So very few people actually chase their dreams, and even fewer get to live their dream. I got to live mine for 15 years. So, by having my own gym, I could structure my whole day around my training and my preparation. And that gave me a platform to launch my career as a pro bodybuilder and continue it. I sold that when I was in my early 30s, and then I opened up a logistics company, me and my wife Trish, and so we were a freight forwarder, and we did that for 10 years until we sold that about 6 years ago, 5-6 years ago, and now I have a Wicked Cuts beef jerky, and so I've always worked.
Which I've heard great things about.
I think I'll have to get you something after this.
Perfect.
So I always worked. I wasn't a typical bodybuilder who watches Sports Center, plays video games, goes to the gym, comes home and plays more video games. I would be divorced and shoot myself probably if that was my life. So I was always worked. I think that goes back to I grew up very poor, and I didn't want to ever live like that, and I never wanted my family to have to live the way I did growing up, and so that's why I always had a business. Because with bodybuilding, I was one of the few that made it to the top, and especially my generation, we hit it perfect as far as being a pro bodybuilder. So financially, it was very rewarding, but I never knew how long that's going to last. Any pro athlete, you have a very finite set of time that you're going to, if you get to the top, you're going to stay there, and I stayed there for 10 plus years as a top guy, but I never dreamed it would be that long, and you're one injury away from it all being over. I don't care if you're a football, basketball, baseball, hockey player, whatever, you're a gymnast, one injury away from being done. And so I never wanted to base my future and my bills and all that off of, bodybuilding. So that's always had a business. And so I was like, all right, if something happens, then I'm still good. I can still take care of my family, and I still have a future. And I don't have to, scramble to figure it out. So, and that's the biggest thing I can tell these young guys and these current guys is get a job, get a degree, open your own business, and base your living off that. And then you bodybuild because you love doing it. And if you're one of those fortunate few that makes it to the top, it does become a full-time job, but you can still work and train and make both of them happen.
Absolutely. So to dive even deeper into that, when you had your business as a gym owner, were you just sitting behind the counter, behind the computer? What were you doing during the day?
No. Me and computers don't get along anyway. So, so it was a personal training gym, and so to be a member there, you had to have a trainer. I had several trainers that worked for me, and then of course I trained clients also. So I would get to the gym about 5:30 in the morning, start my day. So if I was preparing for competition, that means I was up at 3:30 in the morning. I would do my cardio at home, get showered, get dressed, get to the gym, and start my day. And I would usually train clients until 11, 10:30, 11, and then I'd actually go to Metroflex and train, because anybody who owns a gym knows if you try to work out in your own facility,
You have a tough time.
it's a tough time. And
Everyone's talking to
yeah,
you,
because it's
trying
work.
to get your
Yeah,
questions.
and if you're getting ready to do a heavy set and somebody's trying to talk to you and you tell them to leave you alone, they're like, oh, he's
Now
an
this
asshole.
looks bad on your business.
Yeah, so and plus I love Metroflex, and so um, and my gym was pretty bougie, and compared to what I was used to training at. So I would drive across town, I would go train, which was good because I cleared my head, I could focus, get ready for the workout. I would train, and then come back, get cleaned up, and I'd train my clients in the evening. And I'd usually get out of there about 8:30, go home, get my food ready for the next day, sleep for. Luckily, I got by with about 6 hours of sleep on average, and I felt good, and get up and do it again.
How much time during the day did you spend sitting around?
None. Yeah, it was the whole day was structured. I knew at what time every day of the week, where I was going to be, what I was going to be doing, and I just made the most of my time. And my 20s, I just worked. I was just grinding the whole time. I worked going to school. I had 3 jobs I worked to get through school. Got out and started my own gym. And I just worked. And anybody knows when you start a business, the first 2 years you make no money. You reinvest everything to grow it and get it going. And then once I got it going pretty successfully, and then it was just work. I had to work to keep my business, make it successful. And then I turned pro when I was 26, and I got a contract, with Muscle Tech, and then Muscle Development, and then Gas Better Bodies, which I'm still 15 years later still with those guys, and just it all started happening for me. I won 2 of my first 4 shows, and went to Olympia. And it all started to go for me, but I was always you start living it. You get there and you're like, wow, I'm actually doing what I wanted to do. Because when I was 18, I won the Teenage Nationals, and I planned my entire career out. At that point, I said, all right, I'm going to go to school, then I'm going to win the Nationals, turn pro, I'm going to win some pro shows, I'm going to go to Arnold, win the Arnold, I'm going to go to Olympia, win the Olympia. And I planned all this stuff out when I was 18. And I came up with a plan. I had short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals. And I had a plan how to do it. And I stuck to it. I didn't tell anybody that, because when you're 18 years old and you're telling, hey, I'm going to beat Arnold Classic champion, they're like, yeah, right, kid. But that's what I want to do, and I stuck to it.
Yeah.
And I planned out everything, how to get there, and did it go according to plan? Everything except for the Olympia. Was it smooth? Absolutely not. So I had to make take a lot of side roads and back streets to get there, because there was a lot of roadblocks and things that happened along the way, injuries and setbacks. But that's life. You have to learn those things. If you overcome them, it makes you stronger.
Absolutely. And at no point was it an excuse for you to start resting and start sitting around.
Not at all. And I think that's when bad stuff happens, life is a bitch, man. And sometimes shit happens, and it ain't fair. That's life. You just gotta overcome it, and you overcome it or give up, right? So giving up wasn't an option. So for me, there was no safety net. It was either sink or swim. So I had to make it happen.
Absolutely. What I take from that, especially when we're looking at the bodybuilding of yesterday versus the bodybuilding of now, bodybuilding of yesterday lacked passivity. And very few people you hear from who was successful at that time spent much time sitting around. Nowadays, there's a lot of passive behaviors that go on, whether we're scrolling around on our phones, sitting on the computer, watching Netflix. And that passive behavior, just like everything else, it's reps. Like you're training that. Every time you sit around, reps. And now you're training passive behavior, just like some training methods encourage passive behavior throughout the body. And that's just reps. That's training the body to be passive. And now we're surprised when people go out on stage and huge portions of their body remain passive even when they're moving. And it's tough to look at that and say, it's all going right currently.
It's a different era for sure. I think cell phones and social media have it's actually changed how people behave, just like you're talking about. I mean, you see kids, man, instead of like being outside. When I was a kid, my mother would kick us out and like don't come back until dinner. And so we're playing ball, we're playing, chase, we're doing all being kids, right? Now these kids they sit there on social media, they're playing video games or their own social media, and I'm like, it's actually changed how people behave. You go to dinner, go to any restaurant, and watch a family, and how many families do you see? They don't even speak to each other.
They're just
They're on their phones. I've seen couples go out, friends, and they're all sitting there. I went to
texting
dinner.
each other.
Yeah, I went to dinner a couple months ago with some friends, and I look around. I'm the only one not on my phone. I'm like, nobody's talking to each other. And I'm like, look at this shit. And I hit Trish. She goes, what? I go, man, get off your phone. I go, look at this. Everybody's on their phone. We're not even talking to each other. I go, we haven't seen them for like a month. And I go, we're not even talking to each other. Everybody's on their phone.
But it's reps. It's trained behavior.
Yeah,
That's what they've
I
practiced.
said, this is ridiculous. And it's really, and that bleeds over into bodybuilders, I think. It's addicting. I see some people actually get addicted to it. I hate social media. And I'm sure if you guys have seen the videos or something, people used to bring out cameras. I used to go off on them.
That.
So, and I wish I'd have been a little more open to it because there's a bunch of really cool workouts we could have captured. And I was such a Nazi against cameramen that it didn't happen. And, Johnny was talking to me a few years ago after we retired, and he's like, and I was so, I didn't bodybuild to be famous. I didn't bodybuild to be rich or any of that stuff. I bodybuilded because I love to train and I want to be the champion. And, so if you put out a camera or phone and interrupted my workout or concentration, you're my enemy now, and I'm going to get rid of you. And I protected my workout time fiercely, and nothing. That was my space. That's why I went to that gym.
Changes the vibe.
And that was my little habitat. And don't come into my habitat because it ain't going to be good for you. And,
don't poke the branch.
Yeah, and so and Johnny's laughing. He goes, dude. He goes, back in the day. He goes, you were such a Nazi. You run everybody off. He goes, I was open to it. He goes, now you're open to it. And he goes, I don't want to be filmed. so it's funny how that happens. But it was just a different. I wasn't there for that. I wish I'd have been a little more open to it. I think I was looking at YouTube. I didn't know you could monetize YouTube back in the day. And
that would have been a different game,
dude. Bro.
I see it in your expression right now.
And I told Johnny that. He goes, yeah, man, I tried to tell you that. And you're like, man, I don't give a fuck. He's like, all right.
All you heard was camera, fuck this.
Yeah. So I'm like, dude, you didn't tell me. He's like, no, I did. You just said you didn't give a fuck. So I'm like, all right. So.
Yeah, and that's what I see. To use this technology, we have changed our biology. We hold ourselves differently. How I explain it to my clients, I have them grab their phone and they hold it, and then I go, imagine how your grandparent held their phone, and then they immediately hold it out in front of them. I'm like, there's your arm. You weren't using your arm a second ago. You were hanging this thing off your back. If you do that 7-10 hours a day, you're training a passive arm. You're training an arm to be numb because it's not in a place to breathe. It's not in a place to circulate. So inevitably on stage, your arms are passive. It becomes something that you have to squeeze instead of there being life there. And I feel that alone has changed this game so much. And also just how we regulate as a culture, like you discussed. We sit at a table and you see everyone's on their phone. They're not
Yeah.
speaking. My client this morning told me, she goes, I found it so awkward. I went to a baby she went to a baby shower, and she said there is my age there, and then there was a younger demographic, that about 5 years younger, so maybe 28 to 32. And she said none of them were speaking, like at all, not even to each other. And it becomes a situation, and I'm currently in that demographic. I've had to teach myself to speak to people because people would tell me, oh, you seemed arrogant. I didn't know if I could talk to you. And in reality, it was not a rep that I had
Yeah.
practiced. Speaking was not that.
I think with bodybuilders, most bodybuilders are introverts, right? So coming speaking to people and being outgoing, it becomes hard for most bodybuilders. That's just, there's a few exceptions, but most of
When
the
you're
guys
speaking to other bodybuilders.
yes. And so now you have social media and phones and all that. So now you can text someone without speaking to them, or you're on your phone and you just kind of block the world out because you're looking at social media or whatever, and so they just sink farther into this hole. And I think, and then you get a lot of guys. Some guys are actually on social media, introverts. They're actually pretty good, but a lot aren't, because now self promotion is a hard thing. And if you're an introvert, it's really hard. And so back in the day, the companies promoted you. The muscle techs, the supplement companies, the magazines, all this stuff. But now, as an athlete, you're kind of in charge of promoting yourself. And if you don't do that, no company's going to pick you up.
No matter how
So
good you are.
it can snowball either direction. And so it's a really hard thing. And, because of the society and the way phones and social media have changed society, I think it's even harder for introverts to interact.
And just have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes so difficult to have a conversation that we don't speak about important things.
Yeah.
And it changes the society around us.
100%. I mean, how many people sit at home and probably text each other and they're in the same house because somebody's in a different room?
I train young clients as well, and I've trained just two friends together, and I watched them text each other, and they were out there on the turf together.
Mm-hmm.
They're standing next to each other. They're
100%.
texting each other.
I have people in the office text me, and I'm like, looking at them, I'm like, really, dude? So
Yeah, but and that is the world that we're living in right now, and we're not saying that it's wrong. We're just pointing attention to it.
that's just changed. So
And when it comes to our goals, if we have goals of being a top bodybuilder, the more time you spend in a passive position on technology, the more you're changing the reality that goal is going to come to fruition.
yeah, I kind of see what you're saying. With me, that's why I always worked and had other things, 'cause I can't sit around.
Exactly.
And I mean, I never sit around on social media. I do it because I have to, and it's just the nature of the beast. But yeah, I'm active. If I'm not working, not training, then I love the outdoors. I love to hunt and fish and do that stuff, and so I spend as much time. When I do have free time, I'm outside. So
It becomes a tough circumstance because bodybuilders now need to make a living off social media. So in my opinion, we don't ignore the technology. We just learn how to use it where it doesn't affect the biology.
100%, 100%.
Absolutely.
So
Another question that I had, during your prime, leading up to it, what was the food quality like? What were your meals like?
my food, I never skimped on food quality. I think the only time I think I prepared for a show and didn't have the best food was I was at 19, and I was in college, and I was preparing for I won the team nationals the year before, so I was preparing for the Open Mr. Texas competition here in Texas at 19, and money was tight, and I'm like, all right, I knew this was probably gonna be my last show for a while, because I was like, there's no way I getting ready to that show was so hard, trying to pay my living expenses, pay my tuition, still train, buy food. So I ate tuna fish, rice, eggs, and oatmeal for like 12 weeks. And tuna fish was cheap, eggs were cheap, rice and oatmeal was cheap, and coffee and water is basically what I dieted on. I won the show, and I beat. I was 19. I beat guys who were in their 20s and 30s, and back then Metroflex had all the best competitors. I beat everybody in the gym. The only people in the gym I hadn't beat at that point was, I think, Ronnie and this guy Mark, and so that was like, after I couldn't eat tuna fish for years after that. I was just so over it, and that's the only time I think I ever skimped on nutrition, because I just couldn't afford it after that because I knew the importance of having good quality food. So I always, when I was training for shows year round, I always went hunting. I'd hunt a buffalo, an elk, deer, things like that, because wild game is one of the best sources of protein you can get. There's
Absolutely.
no hormones, no preservatives, no drugs in it. It's the way it should be, and so that was always my food source. I had free range chickens, and so my food quality was always very good. It cost more, but I've realized the importance of nutrition. 80% of bodybuilding is nutrition, and so if you don't go 100% with that, you're not going to look your best. You're not going to get the gains you want. You're not going to look the way you want to look. So I never skimped out on that. I would drive a car if it was not nice. I would live in a one-bedroom apartment, whatever I had to do when I was young, so I could. But that was the one area I never skipped on. So I always had the highest quality food.
And I know a lot about that, not
So
skimping on food.
yeah, and you have to. Like you can't. If you got to have 6 meals a day, you got to have 6 quality meals a day, and all food is not equal. And I think that's a hard thing to teach people. And I had a friend who trained with us for years and years, and he was a hard-working dude, man. But his nutrition sucked. I mean, if he wasn't getting for a show, he's eating McDonald's and fast food and crap, and he never made the gains, and never fulfilled his full potential, and because he didn't realize the importance of having quality nutrition year round. So
Yeah. Somebody who would never in a million years put poor gas in their nice car, but they would put poor food in them.
that's right. That's right.
Absolutely. So now, with no longer being competing, now that you're retired, has food changed?
I don't eat as much. There's no point to eat 6, 7 meals a day. So when I retired, I was like 265, 270 off season. I'm about 225, 230 now. When I retired, when you're in your 20s and 30s, you can be heavy. And even if it's, I wasn't fat by any means, but I was in shape, a lot of muscle, but still your heart has to pump all that blood. It's hard on your body. I was never at 5'7". I was never intended to be 270 pounds,
Yeah.
and especially 270 pounds of muscle. So, when I retired, I told my wife, I said, I'm in shape for bodybuilding. I want to be in shape for life, and so I started cutting my food back. I went from 7 meals to 6 meals, to 5 meals to 4 meals, and my weight just kind of settled at 225, 230. I started running. Every other day I was running 2 miles a day, and people say, "How's your knees stand it?" They do. I was doing that pretty consistently for several years. Here recently, I haven't been doing it because of my work schedule. But I just got in shape, and the weight, like I said, I lost 40 pounds. My food though is still the same. I eat the same food, just not as much of it.
Yeah.
And for that, losing muscle is not as easy as what people think, and especially if you're, I didn't want to get small.
Maybe for some.
I didn't. Yeah, maybe for some. And I had to try to really cut back. And I like to eat, and I have a very fast metabolism. So cutting a meal out was like a big deal because I was going to bed at night not happy, and but eventually it all slowed down, and the weight came down, and I feel great.
Yeah, but you never jeopardize food quality.
No, never. No, I think I've got 600 pounds of meat in the freezer right now from elk. I hunted a buffalo back in
I'm gonna need to come over.
November, and I've got a couple of deer in there. So that's my protein source out with eggs, and I always eat the best quality food.
What do you think about the current state of food right now?
In my opinion, I think the reason you're seeing such a high rate of cancer and some of these and diabetes and stuff is because of the food. I mean, look at all the sugar that's in the food and how many people how poor their diets are, and then you look at the rate of cancer and all the preservatives and all the chemicals and stuff that are in our food supply. I think that's why you're seeing such a high rate of cancer. I mean, and look at some of these ingredients; they are known to cause cancer, and they still put them in our food. So I personally think that's why. That's just my opinion.
Absolutely. I have some clients who travel here from other countries, and they tell me that they're eating the exact same thing that they ate when they were back home, yet they've gained 50, 60 pounds.
Mm-hmm. And you go to Europe, and they don't have all that stuff in the food, and consequently, it doesn't keep as long because they don't have preservatives in
Exactly.
it. But it's better food, and for whatever reason, here in the States, we put all this crap in it, and I think there's consequences to that.
What about the cost of food currently?
The United States traditionally had the lowest or one of the lowest, food cost of food in the world, where a lot of places in the world, a third to even more of their income would go to just buying food. Here in the past year or two, food prices have skyrocketed, and that's a problem. And for the average American, when eggs go from a couple bucks for a dozen to eight,
ten
nine,
dollars.
$10 for a dozen, that's a problem. I mean, in like a year or two, that's a problem. As well as chicken, beef prices, everything has gone up. That's a result of inflation, and so that's a problem. They need to get that under control because the average person, especially with the cost of living because of inflation, and that's you get a family of four or five, that food bill is a big increase. So
Yeah, I have three boys, and they eat more than I do.
yeah, wait till they're teenagers. So
Something that I remember you discussing as well was you putting on an old suit and how that felt for you.
yeah, so this last year I was actually I was at the Olympia, and I was getting a suit out to take to the show, and I was like, I just looked at it and I was like, I better try this on because this is I've got, I don't know, 7 or 8 suits I had made when I was competing, and of course I'm 40 pounds lighter than I was then, and it was like when you're a kid and you put on your dad's clothes. It was about the same feeling. I was like, oh, this sucks. So I looked like a little kid wearing my father's suit. I'd lost so much weight, muscle wise, and I don't think I'm small by any means at 225, 230 pounds, but 40 pounds of muscle makes a difference on how things fit. So I had to go out and get a couple new suits made.
I have a story on that as well. So I lived a pretty intense bodybuilding lifestyle, 7, 8 meals a day to make sure I kept weight on, supplements, etc. I lived between 225 to 240. That's why I think I'm accepted in this realm, but looking the way I do now. But when I first decided to make that change, when I had my son, and I wanted to make sure that I was taking care of myself, and I was not just consuming to consume, and I wasn't, in another way to say it, just numbing myself with food and supplements, I dropped down to 173.
Oh shit!
And that is where I coached Courage Opara at the Arnold. And I had all of my old clothes. And I was there backstage helping him pump up. And I'm just like drowning in my clothes. I remember being out to dinner that night. He took third that year. He's getting ready right now for the Arnold as well. I'm excited. But not to jump to that. I remember sitting at dinner that night and I was wearing my jacket. And it was just hanging
Swallowing you, yeah.
over the seat, and I was like, this can't keep happening. but I held strong because I said I'm not gonna do it the way I did it. I'm going to improve my foundation. I'm going to improve my ability to control my own body and not just put that weight on through supplements. I'm not just going to put that weight on through excessive amounts of food. I'm going to do it myself. And something that happened from that time to this time is I went from a style of training that was more science-based, based on individual muscles, and I moved to a style of training that was more intuitive. And it allowed me to understand more in depth of how you train, how Ronnie trains, because when I first got off supplements, I wasn't excited about training. I didn't want to go to the gym. I would walk into the gym, I'd be like, what am I going to do? Free will was not instinctively pulling me any which way. It was telling me to leave. It was telling me to go to the treadmill. And now that I've made that journey to putting myself back together and creating a foundation that can regulate itself more effectively and doesn't require external vices in any degree that it once was, now I can't not train. And I instinctively train intense every single time. I come to the gym. Some days I'm tired. Some days I'm beaten from the last workout. And I start moving, and it happens all over again because it feels so good.
If you don't train hard, you feel guilty.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You feel like you didn't put the pieces
Yep.
together.
Yep, 100%.
Absolutely. Do we have any questions from IG?
Actually, I had one. Is so did you grow up in a bodybuilding family that consistently did those things or went to the gym? And if not, what brought you into the gym? That like who influenced you? And what brought you into that?
Absolutely not. So I grew up in, my grandfather was a rancher, so was my father. Grandfather was a cowboy, and most of the people I looked up to were cowboys, actually. Where I grew up, our closest neighbor was, I don't know, 7 or 8 miles away. and on a cattle ranch. So bodybuilding. When I started, we moved to Fort Worth, and I started bodybuilding. I think my mom was like, "What's that?" and so
Saw you on stage in
yeah,
trunks.
so I did my first show, and I didn't even tell nobody about it really. I just I told some of my friends, from school. They came, and of course all the guys at the gym were there, and I went and I won. And I was like, I remember I got backstage and I was like, that's probably 16 guys, 15, 16 guys in my class back then, teenage class. And there was two classes, a heavyweight and a lightweight. I was a lightweight. And I remember thinking, man, I just want to beat somebody. I just want to get last place. And I saw this one kid. I'm like, oh no, I got him beat. And
When you
so I
size them
actually
up
won.
backstage.
And so I couldn't believe it. So I went home and I told my family, and they were like, oh, that's nice, but they still didn't really understand what it was. But my mother, she really, the way she looked at it, I'm doing something that's, she saw how hard I worked and saw how disciplined I was with it and how much it meant to me. And I still made good grades. And believe it or not, I was actually a good student. And I made really good grades. And I was doing this and I was winning at it. So she was my biggest fan. So, I mean, she came to every show she could come to. And until she got, towards actually at the height of my career, she got ill and she couldn't come to the shows. But she was my biggest fan. So, yeah, nobody, I was actually going to be a bull rider. That was my goal. I was like, I'm gonna win the world championship in the PBR, and you know win all the money, get all the cowgirls, and life's gonna be good. So
Awesome. Jumping back into training for a second, how are your joints feeling?
really good. People they're like, that's not possible. I feel great. I really really do. I had a few injuries during my career, but they all suffered outside of the gym. I never got hurt actually in the gym, and most of my injuries were tendon related, joints, knees, back, shoulders, hips, all that. I feel great. So
In my view of things, when I work with a lot of different athletes, when I watch you train, I see you stay within a realm of the body's range of motion. Some may criticize that these are short reps or partials or giving a term to them, but I see instinctive lifting that doesn't move into realms where the joints are getting pulled apart. So no matter how intense you train, no matter how heavy the weight becomes, your body is balancing the load properly, and it's not putting the joint into a range of motion that is self-destructive.
when I train for feeling. When I was powerlifting when I was younger, obviously then you judge on your form. And so you got to perform a lift. You're being judged on the lift. Bodybuilding,
It has to move that
they
whole
don't. When
range,
you're on stage at the Olympia, no one cares how much you squat or bench or any of that crap. They care how you look.
or what your range of motion
Yeah,
is.
exactly. I mean, all they care about when you're training, I train for feel. I wanted to train that muscle to failure and lift that weight as many times as I could lift it. And I would train until that muscle was on fire. And like I used to say, I want to train until about when I start to feel it rip off the bone, I'll stop, rest, and go do it again. And that was my whole goal of training. So it's just a means to an end. So if I was powerlifting, obviously you gotta have perfect form. If you don't have perfect form on a bench or squat or deadlift, then you get DQ'd. That's a different deal because you're actually being judged on your lift. So
During your career, you got to travel all over the world. Do you have any, like a top experience or a top three?
I think my favorite. I went to 66 countries during my career
That's crazy.
and counting. I'm still
Yeah.
going to some new ones. And I went to every state. I think there was a few trips that stood out. I think my favorite one was South Africa. I went there. I made friends with a guy, my friend Arnie, down there, and he invited me and Trish back. I think the next year, and he took us on a safari. And so man, we got to go, and we didn't shoot nothing like that. We just took pictures and
Yeah.
we were on like this Range Rover, open top Range Rover, driving out through the bush, and it's really cool. There's a few places in the world that are still very wild. Alaska, parts of Canada, um, Africa, and it was very cool, man, to see all the wildlife, the animals. That's something I'm gonna take my daughter. I think this next year we're planning on taking Faith back to Africa because I want her to see that. I mean, we saw rhinoceroses, elephants, all the plains game, all this stuff, and I'm just afraid one day all that's gonna be gone. And I want her to see and experience it before it is.
Absolutely. So many athletes lose their sport in that realm and they start partying, they start celebrating the travel a little bit more than they celebrate the sport. So it's
100%. That was probably my favorite trip. We had some other good trips. New Zealand was really good. Had fun in Europe. Some places in Europe that were good. It's just when I travel, being from West Texas and way out in the country, you've got a pretty narrow mindset and point of view, and then you go out and you see the world. It opens your eyes, and it strengthened my opinion about a lot of things, and it definitely changed my opinion about a lot of things. Um, you
Can
know,
you give me an example?
um, I'm something as simple as this. As Americans, we're like, we think everybody should speak English, right? And we don't. I mean, most Americans only speak English. You know, some, maybe if you're, some people, speak Spanish is probably by far the second most spoken language.
Yeah.
But unless you're come from a Hispanic family, you probably don't speak Spanish, and or Latin family. So when you travel, like you go to Europe, you go to parts of the world, everybody speaks more than one language. They teach their children. You go to Europe, everybody speaks English for the most part, or they speak a second language, whatever that language is. And it just kind of opened my minds up. I'm like, we should probably teach our kids to speak more than one language. I think there's a lot of benefits to that. I think it's a lot of you know, I think sometimes you look at politics. I think it changed my view on a lot of things in politics when you travel. Um, and then I think you realize too that it doesn't matter where you're from, what nationality you are, race, religion, ethnicity, all that stuff. There's some things that people just want to make a living, take care of their family, and they want their kids to have a better life than they had. And that doesn't matter if you're in China, Russia, UK, Australia, wherever. That's a pretty common thing. And you know, um, I think if you left it up to people, there wouldn't be no wars.
Hmm.
Governments start wars.
Absolutely.
And I think because when you go, especially doing this bodybuilding, that's that common thing that no matter where I went in the world, it's that common bond that everybody unites behind. And so it's pretty cool. I meet guys, meet girls that were involved in this, and they take you around. You get to see the real, you know, side of the country, and instead of the touristy thing. And so I got to make friends all over the world, and got to see and experience a lot of things I would never dreamed I would get to see and experience. So
That's incredible.
I think we have more in common than we do that divides us for the most part, and I think that's the biggest thing I learned.
Yeah. Like I said, humans instinctively want to take care of other humans.
Hmm.
And it's all,
Now, that being said, my favorite place on earth is Texas. So that's probably because I'm from here, my family's from here, or something, and that's where I was born and I'm raised. And
your strength came from here.
yeah, for sure. No place I'd rather be. But I've been to some really cool places and got to meet some really good people all over the world.
That's awesome. Any other questions from?
Yeah, so on a day-to-day basis, because I know you got that jerky company going, and I believe you do maybe some farming as well. So what does your day-to-day basis look like now that you're kind of retired from the bodybuilding scene?
So I retired and got busy. So so I retired from at the stage, but I actually got more busy than ever. I have Wicked Cuts. We opened May will be 5 years, I believe, and so it's doing really well. We're in, I don't know, 8,500 locations across the country. We just got some really big accounts this year, this first quarter, that we'll be rolling out into later in the year. So it's doing really well. I'm very much I'm more involved with Gas Better Bodies than ever. I was a sponsor. I was just an athlete for many years, and then now I actually work in the company and do that too. And then I've got my farm. We got my horses, and we raise hay and bale hay and all that stuff there. And so it's a working farm. Not my grandfather, but my father-in-law helps me with that. And because there's no way anybody who's ever been on a farm or ranch, the work ain't never done. There's always something to do. So he gives me a big help with that, so I can keep that going. And so I also have 3 shows I promote. I got the Branch Run Classic in Houston, June 24th. The Branch Run Classic Denver, May 6th, and then we have the Better Bodies Classic, April 15th here in Dallas. So those shows alone are a full-time job because it's not just a show. Houston, we've got multiple events: NPC show, jiu-jitsu, CrossFit, powerlifting, strongman, arm wrestling, expo, all these things. So
Like the Arnold.
yeah, it's like a little mini Arnold. So expo to go along with it. So and of course the NPC show along with that. So The Denver's the same way. The Better Body show is we're just getting it going, but so those take up a lot of time. So I'm pretty and I do some online training, so I don't take a lot of people. My biggest criteria is people that want to work, and not necessarily bodybuilders because some of them don't want to work either. So I talk to you, and I used to pretty good at feeling people out, and I don't mind taking a few people and helping them. I don't have the time or desire to help 100 people, but just a few individuals at a time, and trying to give back a little bit to a sport that's been so good to me.
What is your thought on peak week?
Peak week, I hate that term.
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, I hate that term. I don't know. I think a bikini girl came up with that term, peak week. um, I don't. See, for me, I never said peak week. It was always, you want to freaking it was the last week. So I mean, my theory on that was my best conditioning. I was in shape a week to 2 weeks before the show. In a perfect, the 2009 Olympia, 2011 Arnold, a week before the show, I was done. And at that point,
ready.
When you do crazy stuff, expect stupid results. If it sounds crazy, it is crazy. So like in the 2009 Arnold, man, that Saturday, I think that Friday, 1 week out, I was ready. I was like, I couldn't be no better. And so at that point, I just slowly started carbing up. I had a little bit of carbs every day, and I cut back my training intensity. Because the thing is, once you're 100%, if you keep pushing, there's nowhere to go. You don't get to be 102%. You become 98%.
Exactly.
And, so I was like, I'm ready. And so I remember that was like one of the most, at the time, that was the least stressful show I'd ever done, because I wasn't like trying to play catch up or, do no crazy crap at the end, carb deplete, carb up, take water pills, all this stuff. I just slowly ate up, filled out, did the show, and almost won. And 2011 Arnold, I looked the exact same body weight, everything, and it's the exact same thing. A week out, I was ready, and did the same thing, and won the show. And so that peak week thing, I don't know about all that. I think that's, in my opinion, I think people that say that, they think they got to do all this crazy voodoo stuff at the end. And how many times you see guys and girls that look great a week out, and then they go to the show and they're like, what happened? It's because of that peak week bullshit.
Exactly.
So they should have just, if you're good, just chill.
Yeah. So, lead into my next question. What do you think about the weight limits for Classic?
I think they got to hold them, man. Because if you don't hold the weight limits, then it becomes open bodybuilding.
Do you think women's physique has become open bodybuilding?
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely what it's becoming. If you go back and look at the 90s, and you look at like Linda Murray.
Oh, no, I mean current women's physique and compared to women's open bodybuilding.
I think they're not as big, but they're definitely more conditioned. I think women's physique is what pro bodybuilding used to be, and I think they're just, the problem is, in my opinion, is they keep picking the biggest, hardest girl. That's not what classic women's physique was supposed to be. And I think when you had Julianne, I think beautiful. That was what it should be right there. And they just let it keep, and it's not the girl's fault because they want to win. So, okay, she's a champ, so we're gonna train, get bigger, harder, and more muscular to beat her, and then they get rewarded. And so everybody sees that, and that's what they train for.
Yeah.
So, and on the flip side of that, the judges got to pick a winner. So when you have 15 women's physique competitors at the Olympia, everyone has big, muscular, ripped, striated glutes, they got to pick a winner.
Yeah.
So it is what it is, I guess. I think I wish they would have been a little more strict and picked some girls that were a little softer, but that's kind of the nature of the sport. I think as judges, and it's very easy to look up there, and you, especially anybody who's competed, you always look at the person who's more conditioned, because you realize, okay, that person suffered, and it's hard to pick someone who's not as conditioned, even though that might actually fit the criteria better.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I may come from a biased place, coaching a lot of classic people, but I personally feel that the weight classes are almost affecting how great the last final look could be because of the game that has to be played to make weight.
Yeah, I agree. I completely see that, and I'm 100% agree with that. But if you take away the weight classes for men's, men's classic
Then
bodybuilding,
judging has to be proper.
yeah, because otherwise it becomes
If
open
if
bodybuilding.
if judging cannot keep it under control, absolutely.
Hmm.
But if judging could keep it in a realm of this is how we view classic, this is how we view bodybuilding, then I almost think classic could be even better with, because essentially it would be their 2 to 3 week out look with better conditioning rather than their look with emaciated areas.
I agree with that, but I still I think they need to keep the weight classes, because what will happen, it will become open bodybuilding, and that kind of defeats the purpose of classic.
Yeah,
So-
maybe 5 more pounds then. Any more questions from anyone online? Awesome, man. Is there anything else that you wanted to leave with us?
No, that's it. Bodybuilding has been very good to me. Everything I've said it before, everything I have in life I owe to bodybuilding, because it taught me the discipline, the work ethic, the consistency that I apply to other areas of my life, and been successful in other areas besides just bodybuilding. My personal relationship with my wife, to businesses, to things like this. If you apply all those principles that bodybuilding will teach you, then you'll be successful in whatever you do. And so it's when I walked into the Metroflex gym when I was 16, 17 years old, I didn't realize it then, but that changed the whole trajectory and course of my life. And so sometimes you don't realize that something as simple as going to a gym, the long-term effect it's going to have you.
And what that can supply for
Absolutely.
regulation goals
And I think the biggest thing I would tell people, listen out there, especially for the young people, if you have a dream, go after it. But you got to be realistic. You got to come up with a plan and short, medium, long-term goals, and how you're going to get there. And have a plan B too, because things happen, things out of your control, and so have a plan B, so you're not living under a bridge in a cardboard box.
Absolutely. And there's difference between cockiness and affirmations.
I think it's the difference between cockiness and confidence. You can be confident, and people sometimes mistake that for cockiness, but there's a difference.
Absolutely.
So I was very confident I could achieve my goals, and I wasn't being cocky. I was just confident.
Yeah.
I wasn't afraid to put the work in.
Yeah.
So,
And this mind that we have is very goal driven. It's like a missile.
mhm.
You have to give it a goal. You have to give it a destination. Saying that you want something, saying that you're going to get it, doesn't mean that you're cocky. It means that you're lining yourself up for that goal. Just like victory speeches in the shower.
Yeah, I guess you saw her with my interviews. Yeah, so I was when I won the Arnold Classic, I would my whole prep, I would every day if I train, I'd go home and I'd shower. First thing I do, I practice my victory speech in the shower, and of course nobody knew about that.
Yeah.
I'm sure Trish probably heard me in there babbling, but so when I won, this is what's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
This is what I did. I practiced my victory speech every day after I trained. I went to bed thinking about it. I dreamed about it. I woke up in the morning. The first thing I thought about it was winning, because the first thing I did was get up and do cardio. And so my whole being was, I'm going to win the show. And I just, I convinced myself I've already won the show. Now I just got to go out and let my actions, follow.
It set the trajectory of your day.
Exactly. And it happened. So I think, if you don't believe it yourself and really believe it, no one else is going to believe it. And then you ain't going to make it happen. So you got to believe it. And I told myself I'm winning this year. And I had this whole victory speech. And so when Arnold started interviewing me, I just
I've got this.
Yeah, so
No nerves there.
I practice it every day for, 120 days. So
That's awesome.
So.
I'm so grateful that you were able to be my first. Thank you, sir.
Glad to be here. So when you become the big fish, I can say I was first.
Yes, sir.
So.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys.